The courtroom was packed, the atmosphere tense with anticipation. Everyone present knew something significant was about to unfold. Representative Jasmine Crockett had been under fire recently, facing harsh criticism from political adversaries and media pundits alike. But no one expected the dramatic confrontation that was about to take place. When Judge Roberts called her unfit during a heated legal exchange, gasps filled the room. Some thought she might retaliate with rage, others thought she would storm out, but instead, she remained composed. That very moment set the stage for what would become one of the most powerful courtroom responses in recent memory. Jasmine sat still for a brief second, took a calm breath, and looked directly at Roberts, not with anger, but with piercing clarity. She wasn't just there to defend herself, she was there to set the record straight and rewrite the narrative that had been unjustly painted about her. Her poise was unshakable, her presence formidable. Roberts, an older, conservative figure with decades on the bench, had a reputation for tough judgments and colder remarks, but rarely did he make statements that seemed so personal. His use of the term unfit struck many as excessive, even inappropriate, considering the context of the hearing. It wasn't just a critique of her legal argument, it was an assault on her character, her position, and everything she stood for. Many wondered if his comment had been fueled by more than just legal disagreement, or was it political, racial, gendered. Jasmine Crockett, however, didn't jump to accusations. Instead, she responded with grace, choosing the path of dignity and reason. She stood slowly, holding the court's attention with every motion. There was no yelling, no dramatics, just power wrapped in elegance. She adjusted her jacket, cleared her throat, and began to speak. What came next silenced not only Roberts but the entire courtroom. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady and firm, "I stand before this court not just as a representative of my constituents, but as a symbol of resilience, integrity, and the democratic ideals we're all supposed to uphold." There was no tremble in her tone. Her eyes were locked on Roberts, not with hostility, but with the unwavering confidence of someone who had endured worse and emerged stronger. To be called unfit is not just an insult to me, it's an insult to every young woman, every person of color, every underrepresented voice who dares to rise in a system that was not designed for them. The courtroom was silent. Even the stenographer paused briefly, caught in the gravity of the moment. Jasmine continued, unwavering. "I earned my position through hard work, through education, through relentless service here, not through privilege, not through connections. And I will not be diminished by words that carry more bias than truth." A hush settled over the room. Her words didn't just land, they struck deep. Roberts, for the first time, looked caught off guard. He blinked slowly, perhaps realizing that his comment had provoked more than a response, it had ignited a reckoning. Jasmine stepped forward slightly, continuing, "We live in a nation where being outspoken, where being passionate, is often labeled as aggressive when it comes from someone like me. But I refuse to shrink to fit into a mold that was never meant for me." The audience in the gallery remained frozen, unsure whether they were witnessing a courtroom exchange or a historical moment unfolding. Jasmine's voice grew just a little louder, but never lost its calm. "If fighting for justice, for equity, for truth makes me unfit in your eyes, then perhaps it's not I who needs to reflect about the system that allows such standards to go unquestioned." There were whispers now, murmurs among the spectators and even the court officials. Jasmine's response had transformed the space into something sacred, or something beyond legal proceedings. It had become a mirror, forcing everyone to confront their own beliefs, biases, and silence. "I will not allow my worth to be defined by those who cannot see past their own prejudice," she said, her eyes never leaving the judges. "I came here to represent, to defend, and to rise. And I will continue to do so regardless of labels others try to attach to me." The raw strength in her words was undeniable. They carried the weight of generations of struggles endured, of voices silenced, and of hopes deferred. Yet in that courtroom, those hopes stood tall, embodied in her posture, her courage, her truth. Judge Roberts sat still, expression unreadable. Perhaps he was reflecting, perhaps stunned. Either way, he said nothing. Jasmine didn't need validation, though. She had spoken not just for herself, but for thousands who never got the chance to. She glanced briefly at the reporters scribbling furiously, then looked at the faces in the gallery, some tearful, some proud, some simply in awe. "I ask this court not for sympathy, not for favor," she said, her tone softening but never faltering, "but for fairness, for the chance to speak and to be heard, not judged prematurely." Her hands never wavered, her shoulders never drooped. "Because when the integrity of someone like me is challenged not on facts, but on perception, it becomes not a legal issue, but a societal one. And that, Your Honor, is something I will continue to fight to change." The silence in the courtroom was now filled with tension, respect, and maybe even shame. Jasmine had dismantled the accusation without aggression, using only the truth as her weapon. "There's a difference between critique and condemnation," she said. "And when we blur that line, we do injustice not just to individuals, but to democracy itself." No one had dared to move. Her words had the power of thunder, but the gentleness of rain, a cutting, yet cleansing. "You may not agree with my views, with my politics, or with my delivery, but to dismiss my entire being with one word, that, Your Honor, is beneath the dignity of this bench." There was no arrogance in her voice, only clarity. And that clarity echoed louder than any gavel. Then came the moment no one anticipated. Judge Roberts slowly adjusted his glasses, looked directly at Jasmine, and nodded ever so slightly. He didn't apologize, judges rarely do, but in that silent nod was an acknowledgement, perhaps even respect. Jasmine, recognizing the gesture, gave a subtle nod in return. The tension didn't dissolve, but it shifted. It became one of recognition, of changed perception. What had started as a personal attack had been turned into a moment of transformation. Crockett sat down, her message delivered, her presence undeniable. The courtroom remained still for a moment longer, as if absorbing the gravity of what had just happened. Outside the courtroom, news spread rapidly. Clips of her speech began circulating within minutes. Social media erupted with praise, with hashtags honoring her poise and strength. Journalists who had once criticized her began re-examining their perspectives. Political allies rallied around her, and even some adversaries admitted that her words carried truth that couldn't be ignored. Her team didn't celebrate with noise, they watched the world react, knowing the battle wasn't over, but a new chapter had begun. Jasmine, however, wasn't concerned with the headlines. She had spoken her truth, and that was enough for her. Later that evening, during an interview, she reflected calmly. "I wasn't trying to win anything, I just needed to be heard." Her humility struck a chord. In an age of performative outrage, her genuine demeanor was refreshing, even revolutionary. She didn't seek revenge or retribution. She sought balance, fairness, and accountability. That courtroom moment had not only elevated her reputation but also reignited conversations around systemic bias, respect in governance, and the power of calm resilience. Students in law schools analyzed her statements. Professors used her response in communication and rhetoric classes. Young women, particularly women of color, saw her as a beacon. She hadn't just defended herself, as she had redefined what defense looks like. Not with anger, but with intelligence. Not with emotion, but with truth. And in doing so, she reminded the world that silence isn't always weakness, it can be the calm before a storm of change. Jasmine's critics had underestimated her. They had expected fire and fury. Instead, they got wisdom and composure. Her ability to remain grounded under pressure became a blueprint for leadership. Many now say that day wasn't just a legal proceeding, it was a cultural moment. The courtroom didn't just witness a rebuttal, it witnessed history. One woman, unshaken by insult, reshaping the discourse through grace and truth. Roberts, in later proceedings, appeared more measured, more thoughtful. Some speculated that Crockett's response had left a lasting impression on him. Whether it changed his beliefs is unknown, but it certainly altered his approach. Crockett continued her work, undeterred and more determined than ever. She didn't let that moment define her, but she did allow it to empower others. In the end, Jasmine Crockett reminded us all that words matter, but how we respond to them matters even more. Her strength wasn't in confrontation, but in conviction. Her silence wasn't retreat, it was preparation. And her words, they didn't just echo through the courtroom, they echoed across the nation, reminding us that the most powerful weapon against injustice is truth, spoken fearlessly,